Anna Clark's fingers lightly tapped the screen of her phone, quickly selecting a contact. Her voice came through steady but firm. "Hello, this is Anna Clark. I'm on Flight 813, and there's a situation that requires immediate resolution." She placed the phone down on the table, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Her expression remained calm, despite the palpable shift in the atmosphere around her. Nearby passengers exchanged curious glances, while from the galley, two flight attendants whispered to one another, their discomfort evident. The tension in the air was so thick it felt as if time had frozen, leaving everyone wondering, what had happened to compel Anna to take such decisive action? This story is more than just a phone call. It's a lesson in self-respect and how a single act can shake an entire system. If you're curious to find out what led to this moment and how Anna Clark handled it, keep watching. The story begins. The departure lounge echoed with soft conversations, the occasional clink of coffee cups filling the air. Anna Clark sat near the window, her gaze intently focused on the runway outside. The morning light reflected off her polished carry-on and the delicate gold watch on her wrist. She adjusted her silk scarf, a gentle blend of cream and gold, which complemented her sophisticated navy blue suit. Calm and composed, she was ready for the first-class experience she had chosen. When the boarding announcement for Flight 813 came over the loudspeaker, Anna stood up, ticket and passport in hand, and approached the gate. The gate attendant greeted her with a mechanical smile, waving her onto the plane. "Have a pleasant flight, Miss Clark," the attendant said, though the wish lacked warmth. "Thank you," Anna replied, her tone polite and familiar, walking up the jet bridge with the usual feeling of scrutinizing eyes on her. She was used to the silent assessments of strangers, who she was, how she came to be here, and whether she truly deserved to sit in that seat. First class was a symphony of understated luxury. The wide, plush seats gleamed with soft leather, each equipped with its own screen, adjustable lighting, and private partition. Anna felt a slight sense of satisfaction as she found her seat, a window seat. This was her moment of peace, a well-deserved reward after weeks of hard work as a consultant for major mergers and acquisitions. She stowed her carry-on in the overhead compartment and sat down, allowing herself a brief moment of relaxation, a faint smile curving her lips. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air as a flight attendant passed by, tray of drinks in hand. "Would you like orange juice or still water?" the flight attendant asked the passengers seated 2 rows ahead. Anna waited her turn, flipping open the menu attached to the armrest. The airline prided itself on its high-end service, exquisite meals, fine wines, and, of course, champagne. Her fingers brushed over the embossed text on the menu, imagining the bubbles of champagne dancing in the glass. The flight attendants continued their rounds, offering warm towels and greeting the passengers. However, Anna noticed that their smiles seemed a little brighter for some passengers, a subtle shift in attitude as they neared her row. "Would you like something to start with?" asked a tall, blonde flight attendant named Emma, her polite tone edged with a subtle sharpness, as if civility were more of a duty than a choice. "Yes, I'd like a glass of champagne," Anna replied, her voice steady. Emma's expression flickered for a moment, her gaze slightly widening in surprise. "Oh," she said, her sweetness masking an underlying disdain, "champagne is only for first-class passengers. Are you sure you're in the right seat?" For a brief second, Anna's heart skipped a beat, but her expression remained unchanged. She met Emma's gaze squarely, her face unreadable. "Yes," she answered, handing over her ticket. "I'm certain." Emma glanced at the ticket, her eyes narrowing just a bit. She gave a reluctant smile and returned the ticket. "Of course, my mistake." She said it, though her tone suggested she didn't truly believe it was a mistake at all. The attendant walked off, leaving Anna's request unfulfilled. Anna leaned back in her seat, her grip tightening on the armrest, a trace of tension in her body. This was not the first time she had encountered such treatment, but it still stung. She had worked tirelessly to achieve every milestone in her life, but sometimes, in moments like these, it felt as though none of that mattered. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she didn't need to prove anything. Her first-class seat wasn't a privilege, it was her right, just like anyone else who had paid for it. As Emma returned to her row, she began serving champagne to the other passengers. A man sitting in the aisle seat opposite Anna, a businessman with a Rolex and a self-satisfied smile, winked at Emma as she poured him a glass. Anna caught his teasing glance, his smile laced with insinuation. Another flight attendant, Jake, appeared next to Emma, casting a quick glance at Anna before lowering his head and whispering something. Both attendants chuckled softly, and then Emma spoke louder than before. "There are some people who don't know how to behave in first class," she remarked, the words not directed at anyone in particular, but Anna knew exactly who they were meant for. She could feel the gaze of the passengers around her, some exchanging awkward glances, others simply observing, enjoying the unfolding spectacle. Anna's chest tightened, but she maintained her composure. Slowly, she reached for her phone, her fingers gliding across the screen as she selected a contact. The name on the screen flashed, Operations, Skyline Airlines. As the call connected, Anna's voice was calm, steady, and exceedingly formal. "Hello, this is Anna Clark. I am on Flight 813, and there is a situation that requires immediate resolution." Her words sliced through the hushed murmurs in the cabin like a sharp blade, and for the first time, Emma and Jake's self-satisfied expressions faltered. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin shifted. It wasn't a physical change, but a palpable tension, a quiet realization that something important had just occurred. Anna Clark placed the phone back onto the tray table, her fingers gently brushing over the smooth glass surface. Her face remained calm, but her eyes were sharp, focused ahead, as if calculating her next move. Emma and Jake exchanged uneasy glances from the galley at the front of the cabin. They huddled together, whispering in hushed tones, occasionally glancing quickly in Anna's direction. The confidence they had so easily displayed earlier was now crumbling. Anna leaned back in her seat, her posture relaxed but purposeful. She could feel the weight of the passengers' stares, curiosity, suspicion. The businessman across from her cleared his throat and leaned forward, feigning concern in his voice. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, his tone dripping with insincerity. Anna slowly turned to look at him, her mouth curving into a polite but unfriendly smile. "Yes, thank you for asking," she replied, her tone courteous but distant. The man shrugged and smirked as he raised his glass of champagne, swirling it lightly before taking a sip. His watch glinted brightly in the light, the flash of gold almost accentuating the unspoken arrogance in his attitude. "Just making sure," he added, his voice faltering as he turned back to his tablet. Anna turned her gaze back to the window, the clouds outside serene, a stark contrast to the rising storm within the cabin. She lightly tapped her fingers on the armrest, the rhythm matching her steady breathing. She wasn't in a hurry. She knew that sometimes patience was more valuable than immediate action. As time passed, the cabin quietly prepared for takeoff. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing a slight delay due to unforeseen logistical issues. Emma and Jake's faces tightened at the announcement. Emma quickly made her way toward the cockpit, her steps purposeful and resolute, while Jake lingered in the galley, fumbling with an unorganized stack of menus. When Emma disappeared behind the cockpit door, a younger flight attendant approached Anna's seat. Her eyes were wide, and the nervous energy in her movements made her lack of experience evident. She carried a tray with orange juice and water, her hands trembling slightly as she stood beside Anna. "Would you like something to drink while you wait?" the young attendant asked, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. Anna studied the young woman for a moment before gently shaking her head. "No, thank you, I'm fine," she replied, her tone soft but firm. The young woman nodded quickly and returned to the galley. Anna watched her go, noticing the anxious look the girl exchanged with Jake. Clearly, the entire crew was tense, though they hadn't yet grasped the gravity of the situation. The cockpit door opened, and Emma emerged, her face pale and strained. She avoided Anna's gaze as she hastily moved toward the galley, where Jake immediately pulled her aside. Their whispers grew louder, more urgent, as they discussed their next steps. "I told you she's called someone important," Jake whispered, his voice tinged with tension, just loud enough for Anna to hear. "She's just lying," Emma retorted, but her voice wavered slightly, revealing a hint of uncertainty. People like her always pull this when they don't get what they want. Jake glanced over his shoulder, his eyes meeting Anna's briefly before he quickly turned away. What if she's not lying? Emma didn't respond. Her lips pressed tightly together as she turned away, her hand gripping the edge of the table. The atmosphere in the cabin was so tense it felt as though it could shatter at any moment. A loud, sharp knock echoed through the air, commanding the attention of everyone in first class. The airplane door opened, and a man in a black suit stepped inside. The title on his badge gleamed under the cabin lights: Senior Executive, Skyline Airlines. Whispers erupted among the passengers, curiosity and confusion spreading through the air like ripples. Emma's face paled as the man approached her. "You're the head flight attendant on this flight, aren't you?" asked, his tone calm yet carrying an unmistakable authority. "Yes," Emma stammered, her professionalism cracking under the weight of his sharp gaze. His eyes shifted to Jake, who stood frozen, still holding the tray with cups. "And you?" "I'm part of the crew," Jake mumbled, his voice barely audible. The man's eyes narrowed. "Oh, I need to speak with Miss Clark." As the man turned to Anna, his demeanor shifted. His expression softened slightly, and he nodded politely toward her. "Ms. Clark, I apologize for the inconvenience you've experienced. I assure you, this issue will be resolved immediately." Anna nodded gently, her tone calm and composed. "Thank you." The man gestured for Emma and Jake to follow him toward the galley, his voice becoming more firm. "You too follow me." Both hesitated, but the certainty in his tone left no room for resistance. They followed him toward the rear of the cabin, their faces filled with anxiety and unease, until the three of them disappeared from view. Anna calmly took the menu again, her movements unhurried. The man sitting across from her, through the aisle, stared at her. The mocking smile he once wore had now shifted to one of nervous curiosity. "It seems you weren't lying," he murmured, half to himself, half to Anna. Anna didn't respond. Instead, she gently adjusted her scarf, her gaze still focused on the horizon outside the window. The clouds remained undisturbed, a peaceful contrast to the chaos unfolding in the cabin. She allowed herself a private smile, a quiet acknowledgement. The storm had only just begun. The sound of the engines roared to life, filling the cabin as Flight 813 finally took off. Despite the rising turbulence between the crew and the passengers, the plane ascended steadily, cutting through the soft clouds into the deep blue sky. Anna Clark remained calm, her hands neatly placed on her lap, her gaze shifting from the window to the horizon. She was in no rush. She maintained her composure, but inside, her thoughts were sharp and purposeful. Beneath her serene exterior, Anna sensed every subtle change in the atmosphere of the first-class cabin. The worried glances from the passengers around her, the low murmurs mentioning her name, and the awkward movements of the remaining crew members. About 15 minutes after takeoff, the senior executive reappeared in the first-class cabin. His stride was decisive, his face a blend of authority and apology. He carried a silver tray, on which rested a single champagne glass, the clear liquid sparkling under the sunlight streaming through the window. Stopping beside Anna's seat, he bowed his head respectfully. "Ms. Clark," he began, his voice deep and clear, "please accept this glass of champagne as our most sincere apology from Skyline Airlines. I assure you that we take incidents like this very seriously." Anna turned to face him, her expression unchanged, but her eyes were resolute. She studied the glass for a moment before gently taking it in her hand. "Thank you," she said, her tone polite yet distant. She swirled the champagne gently, watching the bubbles rise before sipping slowly. The senior executive remained standing, his posture formal as though waiting for further instructions. "Is there anything we can do to make this flight more comfortable for you?" Anna placed the champagne glass down on the tray table, her hands neatly folding the napkin. "Yes," she said evenly. "I want a detailed explanation of how such behavior could occur in the first place. Not later, but now." For a brief moment, the calm demeanor of the executive faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "Of course, Miss Clark," he replied. The crew members involved have been removed from service and will face disciplinary action once we land. Their behavior does not reflect the standards we uphold at Skyline Airlines." At this, the silence in first class was broken. Anna could feel the eyes of the passengers around her shifting toward her, but she ignored them, her focus entirely on the executive. "Disciplinary action is a start," she said, "but it doesn't address the root of the problem. I've seen enough to know that this isn't just about two attendants making mistakes. This is a cultural issue that enables their behavior." Her words hung in the air, each sentence precise and sharp. The man across the aisle shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze dropping. A woman stood up, the one who had previously struggled to suppress a smile, now staring at Anna with wide eyes, her expression unreadable. In the galley, the remaining flight attendants whispered among themselves, their anxiety palpable. Without Emma and Jake to lean on, they moved awkwardly, their usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. Occasionally, one of them glanced toward Anna, as if trying to gauge the severity of the situation. Anna noticed it all. Of course, she did, every nervous step, the way the attendants treated the passengers with extra caution, the overly polite smiles that now seemed forced. She saw that they didn't feel guilty. She saw that they were afraid. "Sorry," the man across the aisle finally spoke up, his voice breaking the silence that had descended over the cabin. "I don't mean to intrude, but—" He paused, clearly weighing each word carefully. "Are you someone important?" Anna slowly turned her head, meeting his gaze directly. She studied him for a moment before replying, her voice even. "Important is a relative term," she said, "but I would say I have the ability to hold others accountable when they fail to fulfill their duties." Was deliberately open-ended, leaving the man to draw his own conclusions. He nodded slowly, the arrogance he once displayed replaced by cautious respect. "Well," he murmured, "good for you." The executive cleared his throat, drawing Anna's attention back to him. "Ms. Clark, I will conduct a thorough review of this incident, and you will receive a detailed report within 24 hours. Additionally, the airline would like to offer you compensation for this experience, including a complimentary upgrade for your next flight." Anna tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "Compensation is fine," she replied, "but that's not my priority." She spoke, her tone calm yet resolute. "What I want is systemic change. Make sure your team understands that discrimination, whether blatant or subtle, has no place in your organization. And don't just tell me you'll handle it. Prove it." Her words were soft, but the power behind them was undeniable. The executive nodded solemnly. "You have my word," he said. From her seat, Anna could see a glimpse of the galley, where Emma and Jake stood, their faces tense as they spoke with a security officer who had boarded the plane just before takeoff. The officer was making notes on a clipboard, occasionally looking up to address the two attendants. In contrast to their previous smugness, they now looked visibly worried. Emma's lips were pressed tightly together, and Jake kept shifting from foot to foot, his discomfort evident. The executive excused himself for a moment, stepping into the galley. A quiet conversation ensued, interrupted by Emma's voice. "But it was just a misunderstanding," she protested, but her objections were cut short by the executive's firm reply, though the exact words were unclear. When the executive returned to Anna, his expression had turned serious. "The involved attendants will disembark at the next stop and will be suspended indefinitely pending further investigation," he announced. "We take matters like this very seriously." Anna nodded, the satisfaction in her expression softening with the weight of the moment. She wasn't one to seek revenge, nor had her goal ever been to humiliate anyone, but she understood the importance of standing up, not just for herself, but for those who might find themselves in similar situations. She picked up her champagne glass once again, taking a slow sip. The bubbles burst on her tongue, light and crisp, but the taste mattered less than the profound sense of satisfaction she felt. Justice had been swiftly and decisively served. The flight continued, the atmosphere gradually returning to its usual rhythm, though a heavy tension still lingered. Anna turned her attention to the window, her reflection blending with the distant clouds. She knew that this moment would not merely be a memory, but a reminder of what could be achieved through calm persistence and an unshakable resolve. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, as if trying to mask the silent storm brewing between the passengers and the crew. Despite the outward calm, the air in first class was taut, like the moments before a storm. Anna Clark reclined slightly in her seat, the edges of her scarf falling softly over her shoulders, creating an image of serene composure. But beneath that calm exterior, she was processing every detail, every subtle shift in the dynamics around her. She had learned from quiet battles that even in moments of victory, the true strength lay in the aftermath, the consequences, and how the lesson would either be carried forward or forgotten. She thought of her grandmother, who had worked as a maid in the American South, enduring insults far worse than a denied glass of champagne. Her grandmother had taught her that resilience wasn't just about enduring, but about ensuring that future generations wouldn't have to suffer the same indignities. "Don't let them unsettle you," her grandmother would often say. "Sometimes, silent strength can shake the earth more than any storm." Those words had always guided her, leading her through moments like this one. The blatant dismissals, the mocking smiles, the whispers, none of it was new to her. But she had learned how to handle it, not with anger, but with measured precision. The man across the aisle, who had been relatively quiet since his initial comment, shifted in his seat. Anna noticed him glancing toward her, curiosity now beginning to emerge. The executive cleared his throat and leaned slightly toward Anna, though not close enough to breach the invisible barrier of her personal space. "I just wanted to say," he began hesitantly, "I didn't mean to offend earlier, you handled it very well. I don't think I would have kept my composure like that." Anna slowly turned her head, her gaze measuring every word, every movement. She let the silence stretch out, watching him squirm in it, before offering a gentle smile that was enough to ease the tension in the air. "Thank you," she replied simply. Her tone was polite, but there was no invitation for further conversation. The man nodded quickly, as if relieved that everything had been cleared up, and sat back down, his expression softening. The arrogance he had displayed earlier had dissipated, replaced by something that resembled respect. In the galley, the other attendants moved cautiously, no longer the quick, confident professionals they had been before. Each movement now seemed hesitant, slow, as though they feared doing something that would attract unwanted attention or scrutiny. Anna watched them from the corner of her eye, noticing how they would glance in her direction before quickly looking away. They weren't at ease, perhaps realizing that the solid ground they once stood on could shift at any moment. After a moment, the youngest flight attendant, the one who had nervously brought her the water earlier, approached with careful steps. She held a small tray with some snacks, her hands trembling slightly. "Ma'am," she said quietly, her voice barely audible, "would you care for anything else? We have some fresh appetizers if you're interested." Anna looked up, her expression unreadable, before nodding. "Thank you, I'll have the smoked salmon." The flight attendant placed the dish gently on Anna's tray, the relief clearly evident on her face as she stepped back. Anna watched her for a moment, noting the difference between the young woman's awkwardness and the defiant arrogance that Emma and Jake had displayed earlier. As the flight neared its first stop, a layover in Denver, the atmosphere shifted again. The captain's voice came over the intercom, professional yet tinged with an underlying tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be making a brief stop in Denver to address a crew-related matter. This will not affect the overall flight time, and we appreciate your patience." Immediately, murmurs broke out among the passengers, their eyes exchanging uncertain glances, some leaning toward one another to speak in hushed tones. Anna remained silent, her face unchanged, but she could feel the discomfort ripple through the cabin. From her seat, she could see Emma and Jake at the back of the plane, standing upright as security personnel spoke to them. Their posture was defensive, their faces pale and tense. Emma was gesturing anxiously, while Jake stood with his arms crossed, his lips pressed into a thin line. As the plane touched down and the cabin doors opened, 2 airport staff members in uniform quickly boarded. They made their way to the back of the cabin, their presence immediately drawing attention. A short time later, Emma and Jake were escorted off the plane, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Passengers craned their necks to watch, some whispering, others staring openly. Anna kept her gaze straight ahead, her expression unchanged. For her, this was not a spectacle, this was accountability. Once the flight resumed, the executive returned to Anna's seat. This time, his demeanor was more relaxed, though he still maintained a professional air. "Ms. Clark," he said, "I want to thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We are committed to ensuring that incidents like this will not happen again." Anna tilted her head slightly. "I hope so," she replied. "It's easy to make promises in the moment, but the real challenge is fulfilling them when no one's watching." The executive nodded seriously, acknowledging the weight of her words, before hesitating for a moment. He handed her a small envelope. "This is an official apology from the airline, along with details of the corrective actions we've implemented. If there's anything further we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out." Anna took the envelope without opening it, placing it neatly on her tray table. "Thank you," she said evenly. As the plane continued its journey, the cabin began to return to a quiet rhythm. The whispers faded, replaced by the rustling of newspapers and the soft clink of glassware. Anna gazed out the window, her reflection faint against the deep blue sky. She thought again of her grandmother, of the small but steady victories that paved the way for moments like this. The battle was not over, she knew that. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of peaceful satisfaction. This wasn't just about a glass of champagne. It had never been about that. It was about dignity, about ensuring that everyone, regardless of their background, was treated with the respect they deserved. The clouds drifted by, endless and serene, as the plane carried Anna toward her destination. She leaned back in her seat, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since boarding. The storm had passed, but the lessons it left behind would remain. The flight continued smoothly, the engines humming softly as the cabin's subtle sounds filled the air. The remnants of the earlier confrontation still lingered, invisible yet palpable. Though the first-class passengers had returned to their routines, there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a quiet, measured restraint. The world around Anna Clark seemed to walk on tiptoe, careful not to disturb the calm she had just reclaimed. Anna folded the official apology letter, placing it into her leather portfolio with meticulous care. She wasn't in a hurry to read its contents, knowing that true evidence of sincerity wouldn't lie in words, but in actions. Her gaze lingered on the window, where the clouds stretched out like an endless sea of white, occasionally interrupted by the glinting rays of the sun. The young flight attendant, the one who had brought Anna the smoked salmon earlier, reappeared, this time without a tray. She hesitated at the edge of Anna's row, her hands nervously clasped together. "Excuse me, ma'am," she began, her voice barely audible over the hushed murmurs in the cabin. Anna turned her head, her gaze neutral. "Yes." The flight attendant swallowed, her eyes dropping to her hands before she continued. I want to apologize for what happened earlier," she hesitated, then added. "I should have intervened or done something. I didn't, and I regret that." Anna was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the young woman, noticing the faint blush on her cheeks and the nervous twisting of her fingers around the hem of her uniform. The girl's voice carried sincerity, but also fear, the fear of consequences, the unspoken weight of guilt. "You're young," Anna said, her tone calm but not cold. "It's easy to be swept along by the actions of others, especially when you haven't found your footing yet. But remember, doing nothing can speak as loudly as wrongful actions. In such situations, silence isn't neutrality. It's complicity." The flight attendant's eyes widened, her lips parted as though she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Anna softened her gaze. "Now that you're here," she continued, "that's a start. But next time, act sooner." The young woman nodded quickly, her shoulders relaxing with a mix of relief and understanding. "Thank you, ma'am," she murmured softly. She said a quiet word before turning back toward the galley. As the young flight attendant disappeared behind the door, Anna felt the weight of the passengers' stares upon her. Some looked directly, while others hastily glanced away, pretending to refocus on their books or tablets. She could feel their curiosity, their unspoken questions. Across the aisle, The businessman shifted, leaning toward her with a slight, apologetic smile. "I hope you don't mind me saying this," he began, his voice lowered as if sharing a secret. "But I think you handled the situation wonderfully." Anna turned to face him, her expression unchanged. "Handled what?" she asked, her tone steady but sharp. He blinked a moment, clearly surprised. "I mean the whole thing with the flight attendants. Most others probably would have lost their temper or made a scene, but you remained so calm. It was impressive." A faint smile tugged at Anna's lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Yet it took a phone call for anyone to notice," she said. "Would you still have been impressed if I had shouted, if I had demanded action right away instead of waiting for someone to recognize who I am?" The man opened his mouth, then closed it again, his face flushing slightly. "Well, I suppose not," he stammered. Anna spoke gently but firmly. "Respect shouldn't require a title or influence. What's truly striking is how easily people overlook bad behavior until it happens in front of an audience that can't be ignored." The man nodded slowly, his gaze lowering. "You're right," he murmured. "I'll remember that." An hour passed, and the captain emerged from the cockpit, his uniform impeccable, his face a mask of cold professionalism. As he entered the first-class cabin, the passengers lifted their heads, curious. He stopped at Anna's seat, removed his cap, holding it under his arm, and bowed his head slightly. "Ms. Clark," he began, his voice respectful. "I want to personally apologize, on behalf of myself and my crew, for the events that occurred today. What happened should not have happened, and I sincerely apologize for the way you were treated." Anna looked at him for a moment, her face expressionless. "Thank you," she said at last. "Apologies are easy, but just words don't fix systemic issues." The captain nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. "I understand," he replied. "And I assure you that we are taking steps to rectify this, starting with enhanced training for all our attendants. We want every passenger, regardless of background, to feel welcomed aboard our flight." Anna's gaze remained unwavering. "Training is a good start," she said. "But it's not just about education. What's needed is accountability. Make sure your team understands that actions have consequences." The captain lowered his head again. "Yes, ma'am," he responded. "We are committed to doing so." With those words, he excused himself and returned to the cockpit. As the plane continued soaring through the sky, the cabin gradually returned to a fragile sense of peace. Passengers resumed their conversations, their distractions, but the initial tension still lingered in the air like a shadow. Anna allowed herself a moment of relaxation. She leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes briefly, the hum of the engine lulling her into a tranquil state. She didn't need applause, nor did she crave recognition. For her, victory wasn't in public apologies or compensation letters. It was in knowing that, even if only slightly, she had shifted the balance of dignity and respect. The world couldn't change in a day, but sometimes it could shift in moments, small, steady ripples that could gradually turn into waves. And Anna Clark knew how to create those ripples. The plane drifted higher, like a peaceful bubble floating in the endless blue sky. The soft clink of glasses and the rustling of newspapers broke the silence in the cabin, but the first-class section was quieter than usual today. Conversations were hushed, words unfinished, eyes unwilling to meet for too long. The passengers seemed hesitant to speak too loudly, as though still processing the events that had just unfolded. Anna Clark sat with her usual upright posture, unruffled. She wasn't one to dwell on discomfort, no matter how justified. But she could sense the shift in the atmosphere around her. A sense of unease lingered, not just from the flight attendants, but from the passengers as well. It wasn't guilt that made them uneasy, it was reflection. The remaining attendants moved with more caution, each step measured, every action graceful. One of them approached Anna, this time with a small tray of delicate pastries. "Ms. Clark," the flight attendant said softly, almost in a whisper, "would you care for dessert? This is a special treat from our chef for first-class passengers." Anna glanced at the tray, noting the delicate arrangement of the treats. Her gaze shifted to the flight attendant's face, which held sincerity, but also tension, as if she were shouldering the weight of the entire team. "Thank you," Anna replied, choosing a small chocolate tart. Her fingers brushed gently against the edge of the plate, and she added, "I hope this hasn't been too stressful for you." The attendant's eyes widened in surprise, clearly taken aback by Anna's words. Well, she hesitated, clearly unsure if she should answer honestly. "It's definitely different, but I've learned a lot." Anna smiled lightly. "Good," she said. "Growth often starts from moments like these. Don't forget that." The attendant nodded quickly, her face a mix of gratitude and concern, and quietly retreated to the galley. Not long after, a middle-aged woman seated a few rows away leaned toward Anna, speaking directly. Her hair was meticulously styled, her jewelry simple but expensive. She had remained silent throughout the flight, but now, it seemed she couldn't hold back any longer. "Excuse me," the woman began, her voice tinged with curiosity and a hint of embarrassment. "I couldn't help but notice how you kept your composure earlier. I don't think I could have handled it so gracefully." Anna slowly turned to face her, her expression neutral but focused. "I've had experience," she replied, her voice even. The woman hesitated, unsure whether to continue. Finally, she asked, "If you don't mind me asking, how do you stay so calm? In situations like that?" Anna's gaze softened slightly. "I remind myself of what's at stake," she answered. "Emotional reactions might feel good in the moment, but they rarely bring lasting change. True strength lies in maintaining focus and composure." The woman nodded thoughtfully, her gaze falling to her hands. "That's admirable," she whispered. "I think we could all learn from that." Anna didn't rush to respond, letting the words settle. After a moment, with a light smile, she said, "It's something we all have to learn and relearn." As the flight neared the halfway point of the journey, the senior operations manager returned to Anna's seat. This time, he carried a tablet, the screen glowing softly with a prepared document. "Ms. Clark," he began, his tone more confident than before but still respectful. "I wanted to update you on the steps we're taking based on today's events. May I?" Anna gestured for him to continue, her face focused. He scrolled through the screen, moving down the list. "Currently, all flight attendants globally will undergo additional training on bias and professionalism, with an emphasis on inclusivity," he said. "We will also be reviewing in-flight service protocols to ensure that all passengers are treated fairly, regardless of perception." Anna nodded slightly but remained silent, prompting him to continue. "We've also created a fast-track reporting system for incidents like this," the manager continued. "If passengers feel they're being treated unfairly, they can report directly to the board of directors without delay." "That's a good start," Anna replied after a moment. "But the process is only effective if those enforcing it are held accountable. How will you ensure responsibility at every level?" The manager's face tightened slightly, but it remained friendly. "We'll implement stricter performance evaluations for the team," he answered. "Any violations of standards will result in immediate consequences, including termination." Anna studied him closely, remaining silent long enough to make him feel the need to adjust slightly. "Keep those promises, and maybe you will truly make a difference," Anna said. The manager nodded, relief visibly washing over his face as he excused himself and returned to the kitchen area. Although Emma and Jake had been removed from the flight hours ago, their absence still hung over the crew like a heavy shadow. Every interaction between them and the passengers now seemed calculated, more carefully considered. Anna could feel the ripple of influence spreading, gently but undeniably. She knew that firing Emma and Jake wasn't just a punishment, it was a message to the entire crew, the passengers, and the airline itself. People might forget specific moments, but they rarely forget the consequences of those moments. As the flight neared its destination, the young flight attendant returned to Anna's seat one last time. She stood there for a moment, her hands clenched as though summoning the courage to speak. "Ms. Clark," she began hesitantly, "I just want to thank you for the way you handled everything. It made me realize the importance of speaking up when something isn't right." Anna looked at the young flight attendant for a moment, her expression softening. "I'm glad to hear that," she said. But remember, words are just the beginning. It's action that really matters." The flight attendant nodded sincerely, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I'll remember that," she promised before turning to leave. As the plane began its descent, Anna gazed out the window, observing the vast city below. The golden streaks of the sunset reflected on the skyscrapers, a quiet reminder of the world out there, waiting beyond this moment. For the other passengers, this flight would become just a fleeting story, something to tell friends over dinner or reflect upon in silence. But for Anna, it was just another chapter in a bigger story, one that she had been writing her whole life. The wheels touched down gently, and the plane gradually slowed on the runway. Anna gathered her things, moving slowly and deliberately. When she stepped off the plane, the cold air of the jet bridge greeted her, the fresh breeze replacing the tense atmosphere inside the cabin. She walked, each step a reminder of the strength required to stand firm in the face of injustice. This was not the end of her journey, it was simply a new chapter. The ripples she knew would continue to spread. The jet bridge was silent as Anna walked onto the polished airport floor, the click of her heels echoing softly against the tile. Other passengers followed, keeping their distance, their steps seemingly lighter, as if the tension from the plane still clung to them. She adjusted her scarf and grabbed the handle of her leather suitcase, her mind already shifting to the next steps as she moved through the terminal. Anna felt the weight of her actions as a reminder of responsibility, not as a burden, but as a reminder of the decisions she had made. Each decision, each word on the flight, was a part of a larger ripple effect, an influence that had already begun to extend beyond the first-class cabin. As she exited the terminal, Anna sought a quiet corner near the lounge area. The airport around her buzzed with activity, announcements over the PA, luggage wheels clattering, and passengers chatting, but she blocked it all out. She pulled out her phone, opened her contacts, and selected a number saved as Aunt. The familiar ringtone echoed in her ear, and it wasn't long before a warm, familiar voice answered. "My dear," her aunt said, her voice gentle and loving. "How was your flight?" Anna smiled faintly, leaning against the wall. "Eventful," she replied, her voice calm but carrying a deeper meaning. "Let me put it this way, I had to remind a few people what dignity means." There was a pause on the other end, then her aunt sighed softly, as if understanding completely. "Oh, I see," she said. "Another one of those moments, huh?" "Yes," Anna answered, "but this time, there's something different. It's more public and the impact is immediate." "And how did you handle it?" "Calmly, I hope?" her aunt asked, her tone filled with understanding. "Calmly," Anna replied, her voice steady. "At least, I think I did," Anna said. "I didn't want to pour oil on the fire, but I wasn't about to let it slide either." Her aunt's voice laughed softly, a soothing balm to Anna's thoughts. "You're stronger than I was at your age. You have enough grace to rise above, but still know how to stand firm. That's a rare balance, Anna." Anna's chest tightened a little at the praise. "I learned from the best," she replied. "You taught me everything I know about resilience." Her aunt's voice softened. "And you've gone further than I ever dreamed. I'm so proud of you, my dear. Truly proud." After ending the call, Anna checked her emails. A notification from Skyline Airlines Corporate Relations Department appeared at the top of her inbox with the subject, "Urgent." Opening the email, she found a detailed message from the senior operations manager she had spoken with earlier. It outlined the immediate actions the airline had taken in response to the incident, including the termination of Emma and Jake. Both attendants had been removed from service and would undergo re-evaluation. An expedited bias training program was being launched, beginning with high-traffic routes like the one Anna had just flown. A review of service policies was also underway, with mandatory checks planned to ensure fair treatment across passenger classes. At the bottom of the email was a personal note. "Dear Ms. Clark, we deeply regret that this incident occurred and want to thank you for your grace and patience in handling it. Please know that your feedback has driven meaningful changes within our organization. Should there be anything further we can assist with, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. Sincerely, Nathan Ford, Senior Operations Manager, Skyline Airlines." Anna read the note. twice, her eyes lingering on the words, meaningful changes. She wanted to believe it was sincere, but she also knew promises could fade when the moment passed. As Anna walked toward the baggage claim area, a familiar voice stopped her. "Ms. Clark." She turned to see the young flight attendant from earlier, the one who had brought her dessert, standing not far away. Her uniform was still neat, but her posture was less rigid, a touch uncertain. "I'm sorry to bother you," the attendant said, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to thank you again for everything. Seeing how you handled everything, it's made me think a lot." Anna studied her for a moment, her expression softening. "That's a good thing," she said. "Thinking is where everything begins, but don't stop there." The attendant nodded quickly, her eyes lighting up. "I'll remember that," she promised before hurrying back to rejoin the rest of the crew. Anna stood there, watching her go, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. Change doesn't always come from grand gestures. Sometimes, it begins with one person deciding to quietly change themselves. Weeks later, Anna received an email from Skyline Airlines, a detailed report on the progress the airline had made since her flight. The email outlined new training modules, stricter accountability measures, and testimonials from other passengers who had noticed improvements in service. The airline invited Anna to join an advisory board to help shape their future efforts toward fairness and inclusion. She agreed, knowing her involvement could help ensure that promises were more than just words. One evening, sitting in her home office, Anna opened her aunt's favorite journal, a collection of reflections and advice passed down through generations. On the inside cover, in her aunt's elegant handwriting, were the words, "The ripples you create today will shape the current of tomorrow." Anna ran her fingers over those words, her mind drifting back to the flight, to the faces of the passengers, the crew, and the young flight attendant who had thanked her. The work was not finished, and it would never be finished, but in this moment, Anna allowed herself to feel the quiet satisfaction of having made a ripple that her aunt would be proud of. And she knew, somewhere, those ripples were growing into waves. And so, from a quiet act of discrimination, a powerful ripple of accountability and change had emerged. This story serves as a powerful reminder that small, steady actions can create large changes. Have you ever stood up for what was right, knowing it would be difficult? Share your story in the comments. Your thoughts might inspire others and help drive positive change. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to share it with friends and loved ones to spread the message of courage and responsibility. Thank you for supporting the channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to receive the latest updates. The stories are collected from various sources and do not represent any individual or organization. They are shared with the intention of spreading human values in life and have been rewritten with the support of AI. If there are any mistakes, kindly overlook them with understanding. Wishing you all the best in life.